In most colleges and universities, email is really, really, really important. Your school will send numerous updates, and many professors will communicate through email, especially if they need to contact you personally. In this video, I'll explain the elements of an email message, and I'll provide you with some examples that you can modify to suit your situation. After watching this video, you'll be able to email your professors effectively and be confident that you will not stand out for the wrong reasons. Elements of an email. Every professional email you send will include at least 4 elements: sender's address, recipient's address, subject, and message. Other components like attachments are also possible, but we'll stick to the basics in this video. Sender's address. Every email address contains only one @ symbol and at least one period. For example, one of my email addresses is scott.t.tanaka@gmail.com. Even though I've typed this with some capital letters, capitalization is not important in email addresses. Your address should be automatically included in an obvious place when you compose a new email. If you're logging in through your school's webmail portal, then the system will already know your identity. It's unnecessary to specifically type this part out. You need to be careful if you're using an independent app or email client on your phone or computer, because if you have multiple email addresses stored within one program, you may need to choose which identity to use each time you write an email. Use your college or university email account to communicate with your professors. Even though many students use their personal email addresses since they're already configured on their phones and computers, it's better to use the address from your school because it will correspond to the information on your professor's class list. It's unlikely that anyone would impersonate you over email, but using this address is one of the best ways to ensure your professor knows you are in fact you. Recipient's address. You need to include at least one email address in order for your email to reach its intended recipient. Even though this appears near the top of most interfaces, I recommend that you do not type this until you're ready to send your message. Why not? It's very easy to accidentally hit send on an email before you finished writing it. While you could easily send a second, complete message to correct this kind of error, it's not a great look, especially if your professor doesn't know you well. As long as the to field is blank, you do not have to worry about sending the message prematurely. Subject. It's possible to send an email with a blank or empty subject field, but you should never do this in professional correspondence. Whenever I receive an email that doesn't have a subject, my first thought is that it might be a spam message, which I should handle with extra care. A good subject will briefly summarize the content of the email. First, let's look at some examples of well-written subjects. It's best for the recipient to have some idea about what to expect and to be able to judge whether an immediate reply is necessary. Accommodations for Test 1 in ABC 101. Absence on September 13th in ABC 202. Reference request for law school application. Urgent. I have your sunglasses. I'm on campus until at least 5 p.m. If I were to receive a message with the subject Accommodations for Test 1 in ABC 101, I would know it's an important issue, and I would already know what date this pertains to, since the message would relate to one of my own courses with the code ABC 101. I probably wouldn't need to reply on an urgent basis, but I'll make sure to follow up with the student to ensure their needs are met. Depending on your professors and attendance policies in your program, you may or may not be required to report to your professors if you will miss class. Check your syllabus or course outline to see if your professor has a specific procedure for you to follow if you will miss a class meeting. In the third example, I deliberately did not include a date in the subject line. If this is a true request, then the professor may agree or decline to provide a reference. If a due date were included, it might come across as though the student was expecting an affirmative response, which might rub some professors the wrong way. The specific dates involved should be included later in the main message. The last example is maybe the strangest one. In this case, the I is a student and the you're is the professor. If I had left my sunglasses behind in class by accident and a student picked them up for me, I would absolutely want to know as soon as possible. It's helpful that the student mentioned when they'll be leaving campus so I can judge exactly how quickly I need to respond. Keep your subject line short and to the point. The subject is part of the overall communication, so you should be careful to avoid the following errors. A blank subject, a single word like hello, or a statement like, I'm really sorry that I missed the first 2 classes, I think I can be there next week, sorry again. I know I already mentioned that you should not leave the subject blank, but it's worth repeating because it's one of the most common errors I see every semester. Show your professor that you're being thoughtful by taking the time to write something useful in the subject field. Saying something like only hello in the subject of the email isn't a good idea because it's not very useful. It's functionally equivalent to a blank subject line. Even though the last example offers an apology, this amount of detail would be better placed inside the message area. Instead, the student could have written a brief subject, such as, my non-attendance so far this semester, before giving more details in the body. The subject will often be the very first part of your email that your professor sees, so take a moment to choose your words carefully. Message. The message is the core of your email. The whole reason why you're sending an email is to communicate with your professor. Obviously, you wouldn't send an email for no reason at all. At the end of the day, professional emails are generally boring. Knowing that most people don't like dealing with email because it's a pile of work, be respectful of your professor by writing concisely. Salutation. Salutation is a kind of old-fashioned word that describes the part of a letter where you would address the recipient, such as Dear Mr. Tanaka. Email has a much shorter history than paper-based correspondence, but it's still common to identify the recipient with a brief greeting. This might feel redundant or unnecessary to you if you're new to using email, because as long as you include the correct address for the recipient, it should be obvious that the message is intended for that same person. Still, you should always include a name. First, be aware that many professors will tell their students how to address them early on in their courses, and their preferences may range from casual to formal. If your professor has asked you to address them in a specific way, do this in writing and when you speak to them. Including only the recipient's name could come across as rude to those who prefer to see a greeting. Generally, you can't go wrong with starting with hi or hello, but in a formal context, it would not be strange to write dear, as one would include in a paper letter. If it's suitable to the context, you could also use a greeting related to the time of day, such as good morning. Hi Scott. Dear Professor Tanaka. Good morning, Dr. Chan. Unlike in traditional written correspondence, there's no specific correct way to include punctuation following your recipient's name in an email. You might continue writing with no punctuation, or follow your professor's name with a comma, colon, or dash. Just remember to always address your professors according to their individual preferences and be absolutely sure that your spelling is accurate. Greeting. I personally don't mind if my students jump straight to the point when they email me, but some people are sensitive to this aspect. Being aware of the power dynamic that exists between students and professors, I reason that it won't hurt to include a short, polite greeting. I hope this email finds you well. I hope you're well. I hope you are able to enjoy some downtime over the weekend. The phrase I hope this email finds you well is now such a cliche that multiple memes poke fun at this boring corporate phrase. I often shorten this to simply I hope you're well, but I never stress out too much about it. In some ways, this is just something that you write to be polite, similar to how we often say, how are you, as a greeting, not as a deep personal inquiry. Another way to avoid the boringness of the standard phrase is to use a greeting that connects to the time of week or semester. In any case, keep this element short. Body. Always think the saying less is more when you begin drafting an email. Professors hate having to read long messages that could have been communicated briefly. Let's revisit the examples I used for subject lines. Remember, if you modify these for your own use, be careful to adapt the personal details, such as course codes. Accommodations for Test 1 in ABC 101. I'm writing to remind you that for our upcoming test in ABC 101 on October 4th, I'll require a test paper that uses large print. As long as the font size is no smaller than 24 point, I'll be able to read the questions. Absence on September 13th in ABC 202. I won't be able to attend ABC 202 on September 13th due to a specialist medical appointment that I booked some time ago. I'll follow up with a classmate to get their notes from this lecture, and I'll be sure to attend class regularly for the rest of the semester. Please let me know if you require a medical note for this absence. Reference request for law school application. I'm applying to attend law school next year, and I was hoping that you'll agree to provide a positive reference for me. I value your reference because I achieved an A+ in your course, ABC 303, which involved the most legal analysis and writing in my program. The deadline for reference letters is still over 2 months away, but I wanted to reach out to you early because I know you're busy. Urgent. I have your sunglasses. I'm on campus until at least 5 p.m. When I was leaving the classroom, I noticed that you left your sunglasses on the instructor's podium. If I hear back from you before 5 p.m., I can meet you. Otherwise, I'll leave them at the lost and found. Notice that it was possible to explain these situations in just 2 or 3 sentences each. Some complex situations will require many words, but most routine issues that students encounter need not be wordy. Closing. The closing may be only one word or a brief phrase followed by your name, and in an informal message, some people will include only their name. Cheers. Sincerely. Thanks or thank you. I appreciate your help. Enjoy the weekend. Many people will close their emails with the word cheers, which feels to me like they know they should include something, but just don't know what to say. There isn't a specific problem with writing cheers, but my personal feeling is that it comes across as a bit empty. When I just don't know what to say, I normally opt for sincerely. Remember that an email to your professor is a professional communication, and all of your professional communications ought to be sincere. If your professor has done something to make your life easier, it may be appropriate to write thanks or thank you. Thanks is less formal and thank you is more formal, but don't stress out about this. Both are polite. As in other areas, sometimes the timing of your email will lend itself to a specific phrase, such as enjoy the weekend. This would be strange in an email that's sent out on Wednesday morning, but appropriate for most messages that are sent on Fridays. Following the closing, include your full name as it is registered with your college or university. Even if all your friends know you by a nickname, your professor might not. If you use more than one name, possibly in different languages, write your name as you wish to be addressed and include your additional name or names in brackets. You may also choose to follow your name with your student number or other contact information, but generally your professor would have informed you about such requirements ahead of time if this is important to them. Final thoughts. The purpose of every email is to transmit information from one person to another. When students write to their professors, it's normal to include some types of information, such as your course code and section number, which you wouldn't include in other contexts. Because email is a predominantly text-based medium, be sure to carefully check your spelling. Always think twice before committing something to writing. If you're upset in writing a hot-headed message, for example, save it as a draft for a day or two, and reconsider your words and tone before sending it. Again, even though it appears early on in the interface for composing an email, do not write your professor's email address until you're ready to send the email to avoid any embarrassment that sending a premature message might cause. If this video helped you, please like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel.